and rightly so, for basic treaty obligations and commitments are at stake. For signatories of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or what we normally call NPT, the right to develop nuclear energy is conditional on the solemn obligation not to build or acquire nuclear weapons and to comply with standards set and monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. But when we step back from the headlines, it should be clear that we cannot continue to lurch from crisis to crisis until the regime is buried beneath a cascade of nuclear proliferation. Twice last year, at the 2005 NPT Review Conference and at the World Summit, governments had the chance to strengthen the foundations of the NPT regime by agreeing to measures such as a more robust atomic agency inspections, incentives and guarantees for countries to forego the enrichment and processing of fissile materials, and energetic steps to meet disarmament commitments. Both times, they failed. We cannot afford any more such squandered opportunities or chances. The summit's other failure, of course, was that it did not agree to the enlargement of the Security Council. The current composition of the Council creates a perception that it has a very narrow power base, with just 5 countries calling the shots. Besides, its composition does not reflect the geopolitical realities of today, of the 21st century. I have in the past described this situation as democracy deficit. The base must be broadened sooner or later. The Security Council will have to be enlarged. Dear friends, as you can tell, our agenda is ambitious. Our success in advancing it depends not only on governments or governments' representatives and international officials. It will rest on voters, consumers, civil society groups, and concerned men and women of all ages, in rich and poor countries alike, thinking and acting as global citizens, understanding the need for all the peoples to seize common opportunities and defend against common threats. After all, this is the essence of effective multilateralism. And that is why this new Institute for Global Citizenship is so important. We all have the power to make choices. We should never doubt that. We all have the power to make choices. We can choose to be silent and turn away, or we can step forward and take action. Here at Macalester, you have chosen to make a difference, and there is so much you can do. You can take a role in research, leadership, and advocacy. You can help hold governments to their commitments. Tell them words are not enough, we want action. You can work to ensure they look beyond the short term. You can strengthen and develop new ways of pursuing dialogue among countries, cultures, and communities. However you choose to carry out your mission as global citizens, I know you will keep demonstrating the fallacy of a certain perception of America, the perception of an insular America with no interest or understanding in the world beyond these shores. And as you do, I hope you will always look to the United Nations as a forum in which Americans, along with all the world's other peoples, can work together for freedom, prosperity, and peace. I am grateful to every one of you for your commitment and wish you every success on your journey. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned earlier, we had previously asked students to submit some questions for the Secretary General, and I will now, on their behalf, ask a few of those. Since you concluded your remarks by referring to the United States, I thought I would begin with this one. Mr. Secretary General, in your estimation, is the United States of America fulfilling the obligations of its leadership role with regard to implementing the major decisions of the United Nations? No one ever said our students asking questions.
No. Let me start by saying that, of course, the U.S., as a major power in the world, the only superpower in the world, does have special responsibilities and a special leadership role. The U.S., as a member of the Security Council, one of 5 members, have a historic and special responsibility for the organization and to ensure that the ideals enshrined in the Charter are respected and lived up to. The U.S. has a leadership role in working with other member states and other governments to transform the organization and make it what it ought to be. They have worked with us in many areas. There are other areas where they have stood back. They have been cooperative in our peacekeeping operations, generous in our humanitarian work, and they've worked with us also in the fight against HIV/AIDS and on development issues. We've had some differences on issues like the International Criminal Court, where the United States has not acceded and, in fact, has tried to fight against the creation of the court. But I was relieved recently that the U.S. joined other members of the Security Council to refer the case in Darfur to the International Criminal Court. The U.S. does have a leadership role, and I would urge it to work with other like-minded countries to make the world what it ought to be and to make multilateralism a real force in our world today.
Ever since its birth, the United Nations has been very dependent on both the annual financial contributions and, when necessary, the military force of the member states. Do you foresee a future in which this dependency either will be or should be reduced?
It's going to take a long time. Yeah. There have been suggestions. Let me start with the financial issue first. Obviously, as an organization, we have no independent sources of funding except contributions from our member states. There have been attempts in the past where suggestions have been made that we should look for innovative and other sources of funding for UN activities, for development, and for humanitarian action. Some have suggested that we should tax carbon emission and use that sum to fund UN activities. We held a meeting in Monterey a couple of years ago where the question of new sources of funding was very much on the table, and the idea of encouraging citizens to help in funding a solidarity fund was broached. And I'm happy to say that some governments have taken that forward. The French have started. They are asking citizens to pay a certain amount on international air tickets, which will go into a fund to be used to assist humanitarian activities. The United Kingdom has also agreed to join that effort. I was with the Chancellor Gordon Brown 2 days ago in New York, who confirmed that the UK will be joining the effort, and several other governments have agreed to do that. But of course,